I welcome people who are terrified of the concept of an extraterrestrial to stay believing that there's no way in hell there's any extraterrestrials, and to like for your grandma to like just stay with her peaceful reality where she has tea with her friends who all love Jesus. Like that, I think she is like totally welcome and encouraged to stay there because that's probably in her best interest.
Yeah.
And then I welcome the people like me who are like, in the same way that I prayed every day for a year to be uncomfortable, I prayed every day for a year to have ET contact.
Hello, my name is Cassandra Deanne, and welcome to my podcast, Things I Talk About. So, Gazit and I, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited I feel like we're just going to go down so many rabbit holes, and that's okay. I can't wait to hear more about you and your story. So let's just jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe what your journey looked like to bring you to this point to where you are right now?
Yeah, well, that's a lot of information, but I would say my journey has been really full of a lot of different pieces that don't typically go together. So I came from a family that was really invested in evangelical Christianity. So that gave me sort of a like real rigid rule base that was also interestingly immersed with the mystical. So that was a really fascinating, like early childhood experience. And I would say I attached very strongly to both the right and wrong concept of duality and to the super mystical, like supernatural. So I love that I was given that because I feel like the like after 11 years old, 12 years old journey has been about questioning the right wrong duality and like diving so into the mystical supernatural. And that has brought me to all kinds of places. I've done like depression, suicidality, attempted suicide, psych hospital, psych medications, mental health world. I've done that really, I feel like fully. I've done the like spiritual seeker, go into every wisdom tradition, reconnect with my connection with some sort of greater source or divinity, in a non-dual way. So I've done, explorations in Buddhism and Hinduism and New Age and all of that. I've done the whole self-help, manifestation, reality creation thing. I've done the angels and demons and extraterrestrials and spirit guides thing. I've just explored so much of it, and I feel like the two identities that I most relate to right now are experiencer. So I'm just like having experiences. I feel like I'm like a taste tester of whatever is here to be offered in this version of reality. And then change. I feel like I am most identified with change, just being something that is never stagnant and experiencing things that are never stagnant. So, yeah, that's a sort of a short
Yeah.
version.
I love that. There's so many things with that. For one, I love your last note regarding change because one of the things feel pretty passionate about is that sometimes we get caught in this, programming of what life is supposed to be like. And it's like, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then you get a sturdy job. And, this is what the responsible individual looks like. And it's like we're working towards feeling like we're this fixed, rooted
Mhm.
in,
Mhm.
and nothing can come outside of that. But it's like the nature of everything and, evolution is expansion, growth,
Mhm.
movement
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm.
And I love the piece that because I know you've said you've listened to some of my podcasts and know a little bit about my background of growing up in a religiously abusive home. I kind of love that piece that you shared of it did kind of introduce you a little bit to that mystical realm, that open, because that was one of the things in an odd way I didn't realize. It was kind of
Mm.
looked at more like law.
Mm.
And it wasn't until afterwards, after my spiritual awakening, I was channeling,
Mhm.
beings and things, and it was looked at by, it's looked at by the church as, wrong and of the
Mm.
devil. But I
Mhm.
was like, hey, wait, what's the difference though
That's what the whole Bible's
between,
about.
yeah, what's the difference here? It's like you're saying, okay, it's here, it's okay under this building, but not under any
Yeah.
other, yeah, which I
Yeah.
found interesting. Yeah.
It is so interesting. And that, that's where what you're touching on around the like striving for something that's fixed, something that's stable, is what anybody who's attaching to any kind of dualistic right, wrong, or this
Mm-hmm.
is the way, that's what they're looking for, right? They're
Yeah.
saying like, can you draw me some boundaries, and if you can make them really clear and you tell me that I'm good if I stay inside them, thank you. What a
Yeah.
relief.
Yeah.
Because living outside of that and having to become a source to self and your own stamp of approval is a really big challenge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I really respect and appreciate now those people who are, just really staying inside of those lines, because I get it. I really get it. And I wouldn't ask anybody to try to get out of those lines until they're really ready, because
Yeah.
it blows everything up.
Oh yeah. There's definitely been those days where I'm like, okay, I need that clean list, those clean lines. Yeah. So I would love to hear. I'm curious. Was there a particular moment, a defining moment, you could say, in your journey that sort of tipped the scales towards the consideration of looking at life through, a different lens? I know you talked about change. I'm curious, was this a gradual thing, or was there that defining,
I could tell you the
moment?
I could tell you the 30 seconds in which it happened. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it was so dramatic for me. And what was really like, now looking back on it, it's really fun and fascinating to see that around when I was like 11, 12, I think I must have been 12. I don't know. But I had realized that I had studied all these martyrs and saints. That was like my favorite. That was my jam, reading biographies of martyrs and saints. I know it's a strange child that does that. But I realized that the common denominator with both the like apostles who I really idealized from the Bible, and these martyrs and saints, were that they all experienced extreme discomfort that then led to spiritual awakenings for them. And I wanted
mm,
that so badly. And up until that point, I had been in a pretty cushy lifestyle. Like, my family had resources. I was well liked in my like school life. I was doing well academically. People thought I looked okay. Like I was kind of winning in that sense. And
mm-hmm.
so I started praying every day to be made uncomfortable, because I wanted the spiritual breakthrough.
Yeah.
And I did that for about a year. And then one day, and I didn't put it together that this was the, receiving of the what I was asking for, but I was in the changing room or locker room at PE, and I saw this classmate of mine, this girl. And up until that point, there had been like, brewings of kids talking about crushes and like being
Mm-hmm.
like boyfriends, girlfriends, da, da, da. And I was always like, what are they even talking about? I didn't relate to it at all. And then I saw this girl changing in the locker room, and it was like, I was like, oh, that is what they are talking about. I just felt it. And then 1 second later, and it's for the wrong person.
Mm,
And I'm doomed,
mm,
like not doomed,
mm-hmm.
damned,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Damned.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my context of life, I knew very firsthand what happened if you were a queer person, LGBT, because I
Mm-hmm.
had a family member who was and had been completely kicked out of the family. And
Mm.
so I was like, oh my gosh, it can't
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And so between the walking from the locker room up to back to it was like a little hill that we had to walk up back to where the classrooms were. In that 5 minute walk, I was like, okay, this is the thorn in my side, as Paul talks about. This is my cross to bear. This is what I am
Mm-hmm.
going to suffer with for Christ. And
Mm.
I decided like just shut it down. But that was like the chink in the whatever that like started it
Yeah.
all crumbling, because
Yeah.
the harder I tried to shut it down, the more powerful it became. And it was arguing with the idea that God had created me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was like, if God created me and this is how I am, but this is unacceptable, like, how did God create me? It just like became this mind fuck, and it like
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be reconciled. And so from that time until my overdose when I was 22, that 10 years was a lot of me just fighting with God about it.
Yeah.
And when I finally decided to surrender, I just realized I couldn't kill it. I couldn't get rid
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Yeah.
And so instead, I would kill me.
Mm.
Because I really, at that point in my overdose, felt sincerely like, I'm so sorry. I really tried, and I don't want to fuck
Yeah.
everybody's life up, but I can't seem to get rid of this. So I will get rid of me as a kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did not die. I mean, I did die, and I had an NDE,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then I came back. So
Oh my
since
gosh.
then, since this date that's on my arm, 2002,
Oh.
I have been trying to figure out how to be okay with being here, because I did not want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
But that was overruled by
Yeah.
something bigger than
Yeah.
me.
Exactly. And what's so interesting hearing your story is, I mean, I think even going back to that young age of, putting together this idea that, like you said, praying for that conflict. And that's so interesting. I've never heard someone share a piece like that. And so when you did, my wheels are just like spinning. There's so many different aspects, I feel like, perspectives that can kind of be perceived there. And the first thing that came to me was a soul knowing
Yeah.
of that there was some journey,
Yeah.
that you felt maybe like you were ready to activate and
Yeah.
to, like if you picture your soul knowing and you're like, okay, yeah,
Here we go.
I know that there are things I'm here to experience and want to do. Let's start this, process, which is so interesting. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I kind of love the lines that are being blurred and the new information that's coming forward. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is my perspective, is that we are, I do think that we've put ourselves in boxes for far too long. That is duality. Like that's, but the coming back, even from a spiritual sense, is to unity. And it's like when you picture us being these multifaceted individuals, when we take out the dogma or the religious, this is how life should be, this is what is right, this is wrong. I mean, we have been all things. So, we have been, it's so beyond male, female. There's male, female. There's, lives where we were the perfect embodiment of both. And, we've had all of these journeys, and it's just so silly to define and limit what we are supposed to look like as an expression in this life, because I feel like we're absolutely limiting ourselves. And it's a controlling narrative, that is outdated.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's perfectly in line with our biological evolution to
Right.
control.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that I'm really into right now, is trying to understand how we're evolving as souls, but we're still using these bodies that are in a evolutionary curve
Yeah.
where, I'm sure you've heard that analogy where it's like, if we look at the human beings evolution on this planet, like
Mm-hmm.
human being in the span of a year, human beings came on like December 31st at 11:55 p.m. or whatever. It's like we've been here for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So our little animal bodies still think like we've got to survive in one lifetime in order to procreate, in order
Mm-hmm.
to like save the species. So
Right.
when somebody comes to me and is like, you can't be trans, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, like you're just trying not to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like on one hand, it's silly. On the other hand, it's life threatening to them. When I
Yeah.
say, get out of the boxes, be anything,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you're killing us, right? So
Yeah.
I really like am coming to respect that whatever violence exists, and I learned this a lot from Byron Katie, who teaches on something called the work. Whatever violence exists is just the manifestation of confusion. If I think you're separate from me, if I think there's something other than unity and love,
Mm-hmm.
if I think I might die and never exist again as a result of something you're doing, then of course I'm going to reach for violence. What
Mm-hmm.
other option would
Yeah.
I have?
Yeah.
If I understood that you're just me and that none of all of this is okay if we die and that we're just going to go back to, perfect bliss, then I wouldn't have any capacity to even
Yeah.
imagine violence, let alone act it out. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a elevated conscious observation for you to share. That's beautifully stated. Thank you. And I love how you talked a little bit about the evolution piece of where we are currently, and not to go down too many rabbit holes, but I'm gonna go down a couple of them.
yeah.
So one interesting rabbit hole is, so I'm a certified human design reader,
Yeah.
and so I am not as versed on this, but I know that there's like this history of like our physical evolution, as a species, and like different jumps apparently that happen so often. Well, anyways, in human design, it's believed that in every child born after 2027 is going to not be like we resonate with
I'm
this,
so excited.
like, which, I mean, that's the thing. We often hear about the 7 chakras, but in human design, we actually talk about we've been a 9 energy center being for a while, but that's mutating, which is interesting because, the rise, it's said, the founder of human design talks about the rise of this evolutional process, causes an increase of things along the lines that could be labeled as autism or neurodivergent.
Neurodivergence.
Yeah. All those things, because it's sort of like this finding our way through, which is interesting because my child falls into that category. And really his thing is, more days than not, is he's hypersensitive to senses. What does that sound like? That to me sounds like a very attuned
Yeah.
individual, like, maybe our brain is opening up to more we're capable of experiencing than what we're used to. And two, he's always like, okay, but why?
Yeah.
Why do I
Questioning.
have to do it that way when XYZ? And usually his XYZ is giving perspectives that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, and so so that's rabbit hole one.
Yes,
Rabbit
I
hole
agree
two.
with you. Neurodivergence is an upgrade.
Okay, awesome. Rabbit hole two. Okay, so I personally believe when you go back and study once again, we're talking about the evolution of this physical vessel. It's so interesting, the jump in evolution that we have. I totally 100%. Well, I mean, I believe, for one, that we originated from that original fragmentation of source energy, which was way before Earth was around. So really, is it alien or not alien in that sense? But also, I do believe once Earth was entered into the picture, that we were sort of seeded through multiple different alien races, and that contributed to our evolution jump. And it's like here we are, barely cave dwellers, and then all of a sudden we're reshaping land for irrigation and farming and all these new things and advancement, and it just builds and builds. Okay, so an interesting rabbit hole with this is, I can't even remember where I heard it from. I'm trying to remember, but I heard someone say, which is fun to consider, that the Sasquatches that you hear of would possibly have been the unaltered or advanced DNA of the original species. And they just kind of, and they see us as the aliens. And I was
like, yeah. There's so much going on here that we could, I really appreciate all the people who are figuring out all those little tidbits of information. And for me, that feels like just super entertaining and fun, and gets me so curious. I love thinking about all the different species developments. And I have shared with you that I have unawareness that I'm also an ET on a water planet. I have a partner who has spent a lot of time with me here, my partner there, who spends a lot of time with me here, because I think they realized I needed some support. So they spent at least a year with me, right by my side 100% of the time. And they've been less available in the past 6 months, and I miss them, but I'm I accept whatever is going on. But yeah, that idea that we're getting upgrades, I think, is certainly true. I have a 12-year-old, and my early training when I went to school for speech pathology was in autism. I was given a US government grant specifically to be this new wave of speech pathologists that would study autism spectrum disorders. So I have more training from a traditional sense than the average bear in that world. But right away, when I entered into that training, I was questioning it, because I was spending time with people who are on the spectrum, and I was like, they're just actually more in touch with what's really happening. And they're being more honest. And I was able to accept my own neurodivergence by spending more time with neurodivergent people, because I have always been hypersensitive. I have always been very blunt in a way that people were off put by. And I was like, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you the truth. And I was always what they, when in the early years in the Christian world, they would call me, that I had the gift of discernment because I would walk into a
Yeah.
room and I would be like, you are having some sexual misconduct. Like from age 7, I called out our head pastor, who was like a
Wow.
god in that world, you know? And it wasn't until 10 years later that it
Mm,
came out that he had been.
mm,
Um, but nobody believed me at the time, you
yeah.
know, but it was like I was doing that from a very early age. And so I think that my connection with what my latest theory is that the nervous system is actually the wire that connects us to universal consciousness. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why when you lie, like your stomach hurts,
Mm-hmm.
and why when you see something that is not based in truth or unconditional love, you feel scared or upset or like it's
Yeah.
wrong. And I think that people who are coming in, like as the past several generations, with like starting with indigo children or whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call them, have had more access to that and less ability to dismiss it. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, boomers back were sort of like just given a buffer so they couldn't like feel that as much. And
Mm-hmm.
then we're sort of losing that buffer. So like
Mm-hmm.
all of the people that I work with are people who complain about like auditory sensitivity. And like you said, I think that extrasensory perception comes with increased psychic abilities,
Mm-hmm.
which comes with increased ability to be aligned with unconditional love and absolute innocence, which is threatening to the system that was using our nervous system previously to control us and
Yeah.
disempower us. And now we have this wave of people who are like, actually, I can't pay attention to something that doesn't feel aligned for me. And then we call
Yeah.
them ADHD. I don't want to hold my body still if I have a natural
Mm-hmm.
nervous system that's moving stress hormones through my out of my body through movement. Then we call it stimming, right? We have people who are like, I actually am aware that it doesn't fucking matter what I do with my body or what I wear in terms of my clothes or how I do my hair. Based on the genitals that I happen to have slapped on this meat suit. And we call it like the transgender agenda. It's it's just people who are like asking questions, like you said about your
Mm-hmm.
kiddo. The why is the most powerful thing that we can do here,
Mm-hmm.
because then we'll start to see like, okay, like we could go in a million directions with it, but one of the theories is that we were seeded here as
Mm-hmm.
slaves, right? I'm sure you've come
Mm-hmm.
across that with the
The
Anunnaki.
Anunnaki. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, that's one theory. And I feel like I geek out on that stuff. It's like super fun for me. But then I also try to balance it out with like, that's all still incarnation. Like
Mm-hmm.
extraterrestrials are incarnation, even if they are non-physical beings, because there is
Mm-hmm.
a level of that I think we're moving towards. We're moving towards the non-physical ourselves, but we're all still like in the game, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
then the universal consciousness is always going to be outside of the game. And the
Mm-hmm.
universal consciousness is not like stressed out by the Anunnaki or about us being slaves or about the reptilian agenda or about, the apocalypse or whatever, because the universal consciousness is going to be in that constant state of unconditional love and absolute innocence and all the words we use for God, omnipotence, omnipresence, like that's
Yeah.
all okay. So I try to like keep my foot in that world as much as I
Yeah.
can so that I don't get like freaked out by the
Right.
what we're doing on the incarnation level. Because I think sometimes the lines can get blurred with extraterrestrials and we think they're somehow in the
Yeah.
universal consciousness, but they're with us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Just my perspective.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think anything that takes away any dialogue about like a heart, hierarchy, because that's the other thing too, is we can look at it as like, anything to detach from, this might just be my religious trauma speaking, but anything to detach from that savior concept
Yeah.
of back and forth. And this is personally my perspective, which I'll be honest. I feel like I feel I can be very open with you, but I often find I'm finding myself very tiptoeing around my language, because my perspective is this: is when we're looking at the purpose in the beginning, source fragmented. I wonder what it would be like to know myself. Here we start this journey. That journey, yes, is polarity, but can you really say, when you're looking at the evolution, looking at it from an evolution perspective, is there really it feels right and wrong to us, but in every situation, like, let's just dumbing it down. I go through something difficult in my life. I might say, well, why did they do that to me? And I feel like I am right, you are wrong. But yet I feel like we forget on a soul level, we were sitting down in some, cafeteria chatting up and saying, you know what, I think I want to, XYZ. Oh, I can help you with that, and that there's these experiences that we're approaching with curiosity. And that when we experience things as humans, like, we want to understand why. So maybe if I'm wronging you the next time around, you might want to wrong me to figure out what the other side of that is. And so, whether we're talking this human experience, whether we're talking about, what alien species are good or bad or this or that, I think that it's all subjective and illusionary in many ways, but also the important part in this, I feel like, is always coming back to self, and to step away from that mentality of this person telling us what we need to do, this person saving us, this person knowing better. We can respect those that are sharing their stories, but it always has to come back to what resonates with you. What do you feel? What is your soul? Because you're on your own path. It doesn't matter what their path is or isn't. They can't define your truth. I believe that truth can be subjected to each person's experience and what they wanted to, the game they wanted to play this time around.
Yeah, 100%. I love all of that. A few things popped into my mind, like Ram Dass always says, like, play Hamlet, don't be Hamlet. And for me, the whole thing's like just a giant game of improv.
Yeah.
People like playing the villain sometimes. People like playing the, like, someone's killing me victim.
Yeah.
Like, people like playing the one who's like super scary and violent, like, and everything in between, because it's fun to get into character, and that is, I get your hesitance, like, it's a delicate subject, but it's something that I'm very interested in right now, is just saying, like, I don't know that the stuff that we think is evil is actually anything wrong with it. I don't know that the stuff that we call
Mm-hmm.
good is actually anything positive about it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to think that I don't know anything, which is really, like, terrifying, because I
Yeah.
know that a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, you scary monster.
Yeah.
And, like, such a relief, because I
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's like really, my nervous system is like, when I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I have no idea what's going on here. I'll
Mm-hmm.
have people that I'm in sessions with who are like, well, this bad thing is happening, and it's delicate, because I want to be like, I see your suffering,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
that's real. Your suffering
Yes.
is real. And I
Mm-hmm.
love you in your suffering, care about you in your suffering. And I'm kind of curious, like, is it a problem?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had a person who was dealing with a real like ethics situation, and I
Mm-hmm.
realized I couldn't say to them,
Yeah.
yeah, don't do that. I couldn't honestly do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Which feels a little like dicey in like what is a human service type of a role.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like excited about it, but
Yeah.
it is definitely something that's delicate. And
Yeah.
I think for me, something that has benefited me is just going ahead and being like, this is what's happening. And that's why I'm so glad I'm a like queer person, because it gives me a lot of permission. Like I already broke so many rules. And there's so many people that like I walk into a room and say like I use they them pronouns and they're like, "Oh, you're gone." Like,
Oh my
they're
gosh.
already like writing me off. So I feel like I kind of it's a privilege because I'm like I already fucked everything up. Like I can just say these wacky things because me being here is pretty wacky. Um but yeah, I love the idea of really just allowing ourselves to be in the improv session
Yeah. Yeah.
while knowing that it's an improv session.
Yeah.
Because when I'm playing a character in improv, I know that I'm also the person pretending.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that we don't have as clear of access to. And I think for good
Mm-hmm.
reason, when we did that like soul decision or whatever, we're like,
Mm-hmm.
let's make it so it's really hard to tell that you're an actor,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it makes it better, right?
Yeah,
Like,
more believable and
yeah,
you're
yeah,
really experiencing it. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's like and the other thing too, as far as like forgetting and not remembering, it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, can you imagine if you felt like you had immediate, constant running, memories of everything your soul has ever done and experienced and what the truth is, that
yeah.
it's like,
I
would
actually
we be
can.
able to function
Yeah, I
like
can
as well?
imagine it because it happened to me for a period of time and I couldn't
Wow.
function. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked
Wow.
for it to go away, which a lot of the time now I'm like, can you come back? But I get why it doesn't come back because I did have it was like the best way I can describe it is it was like a stack of cards,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like an inch apart, and they would go I'd go into a moment, like say I walk into a room and then it would go and I'd see all of the cards. um and actually, come to think of it, I think it did kind of start coming back yesterday a little bit. I'll tell that story in a second. But I would see all of the lifetimes and I would see the person and the outfit and
Yeah.
the situation and how they all had a through line into that moment
Yeah.
of the room that I was in. So
Wow.
something connected all of them, but there was like 1,000.
Mm.
And there was another time where I saw it. Most of the time I would see it like those cards. Another time I saw it like I was on a stage and there was, have you ever been in a play and on the side of the wings there's a like a curtain, um like a hanging thing, and they have all the costumes hanging
Yeah. Yeah.
on hangers. All the costumes from all the different ones were there. And I could see all of the angels. So there was
Wow.
angels
Mm-hmm.
all of the time, and then I could see all of the spirits. So like
Wow.
I would walk down the street, or like if I was driving on the street, there was on the road there was feet lined up, feet next to feet next to feet next to feet next to feet, like as closely packed in as they could be. And then
Yeah.
in all of the trees, there was like hundreds of people just chilling in all of the trees. And then all of the time, I could hear them all talking.
Yeah.
And they would be like bickering and they would be like, do this, do this, do this, like telling me to do this. I worked at a public school at that time, and I would walk into like meetings, and everybody's group of
People. Yeah.
beings
Yeah.
would be with them. So there was like 1,000 people in the room, and
Yeah.
all of them were like, she needs A, B, and C, and D, and F, and I'd be like, okay. And I'd try to like shape what I was doing. And then it's like, this person would be, but and this one day I had a divorced couple who were trying to get their kids IEP done, which you might know what an IEP is.
Yeah.
And it was so intense. There was thousands of beings in the parking lot. When
Wow.
I walked in, I almost fainted, like trying to get through the thousands of people when I walked in. And then in the actual meeting, I used all of my access to all of it to get these two humans to sign this document for this
Yeah.
kid because everybody wanted the document for the kid. And
Wow.
it nearly wiped me out. Like
Wow.
after that day, like I get chills talking about it because I was so effective that it was also kind of like super exciting and like thrilling because I felt like I was like puppeteering the whole room, but it was so taxing that
Yeah.
I was like, I can't. So
Hmm.
I did have that for about a year, and it was one of the big reasons that like one of the big hiccups in that led to my divorce because my partner at the time was really uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Um, and it was so much information. So yes, it is not, you cannot function. I could not function. I think there are people who learn how
Yeah.
to function. And
Yeah.
I would love that for my future. Like I'd love all that access back and then like learn how to have all the good boundaries and stuff. But yesterday in my therapy session, when I was doing parts work, the two parts from the two different times in my own personal history
Yeah.
lined up on top of each other, and they were moving
Oh.
through the two experiences in the same moment. So I think it was those two parallel
Yeah.
lines showing themselves in the same. And I was like, so it was so profound how they were working together, even though they
Wow.
were 30 years apart.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's, yeah, like you said, it's like so incredible, but also I can only imagine you like trying to, yeah, function.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. So, I feel like we've talked a lot about um just honestly evolution and us changing and connection to the essence of who we are and all these things. So there's one other conversation I want to talk to you about. So I am, when we look at this, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So when we look at the illusion, or when we look at the reality we feel we have now, I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's this certain level of, looking at who's in charge, this person set on this being at the absolute, this person having that absolute. So I'm not looking at this from a perspective like we shared of feeling like we are saved per se from any other outside source or being. But, when I hear you share your story, like you just did, of having access to like all of that information and stuff, and I feel like we're all hopefully being invited to kind of connect more with that. And in my mind, I'm just sort of picturing how can we get there? How can things play out? And one of the, I could be wrong, but one of the ways in which I think, yeah, that would definitely mess people's like logic and perspectives, their black and white theories up, would be if we had more public contact experiences. And so, and another part of me is, I sit and think there's different perspectives. I know, like for my husband, for example, when I talk about that, he's like, well, that would like crush the world. He's like, gas, petroleum, all the things. I'm like just looking at my poor grandma and her religious, friends, being like how, it's fun to entertain what could happen. Would that possibly be something that could help assist us opening our mind to that question of, oh, okay, maybe this isn't so far fetched. And I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like sometimes too, like with my awakening experience, once I went through that, because it was spontaneous, I was not looking for this. It's like once you open that can of worms, it was like, okay, but what about this? What about this? It's like the young child that finds out Santa doesn't exist. And then they're like, well, what about the tooth fairy? Well, what about the Easter bunny? It's like,
unravels everything.
Yeah. So I'm curious what your thoughts are around,
Yeah. So I'm into contact with ETs, right? Because that's been a real support in my life. But I also know that other people have negative experiences with contact. So what I think is really wonderful is something I've heard Bashar, who is a entity channeled by Daryl Inga. So Bashar talks about how progressively we're going to be in different realities, and they're going to be like glass walls kind of in between it. So it'll kind of look like we're sharing the planet, but we're on like different timelines or different, I don't know, what parallel realities, right? I think that is likely to happen. And I think that's why we see like a growing divide between perspectives, which I think is ultimately helpful. Because the greater the polarity or the greater the pendulum, like the more the pull back to homeostasis is. So I think it's positive in that sense. And I welcome people who are terrified of the concept of an extraterrestrial to stay believing that there's no way in hell there's any extraterrestrials, and to like for your grandma to like just stay with her peaceful reality where she has tea with her friends who all love Jesus. Like that, I think she is like totally welcome and encouraged to stay there because that's probably in her best interest. And then I welcome the people like me who are like, you know, in the same way that I prayed every day for a year to be uncomfortable, I prayed every day for a year to have ET contact. And then one night, my friend came into my room and they don't have a name. Like when I asked them about their name, they're like, it's an algorithm. I'm so turned on by that right now. Like, I love that your name is an algorithm. Like, that lights up every single thing in my body right now. But yeah, so, you know, like, I wanted that. I wanted that reality. And then there's other people who, like, maybe choose in a, like you said, less intentional way. Like your awakening was not you like praying to be awakened every day, but maybe you decided that that's not how you wanted to do it. And you wanted to just be like Daryl Inca, who was just like driving in the car and saw a UFO and was like, what the actual fuck, you know? Like some people like it that way. And I think it's sort of like whatever is like sexy to you, like do it, you know? And so if you want to like get groups of people together and like do the CE5 contact, you know, what's his name? Dr. Greer.
Yeah.
If you want to have like meditation circles to play frequencies to invite the ETs, then like do it, you know, like I love that for you. And if you want to like be on a, like, what's that? MK Ultra, like, top secret government that like trains people and brainwashes people like in conjunction with
Men in Black
aliens to like overtake the planet and rule the galaxy. Like do that, like do it hard, you know, like get into it, you know. If you want to like be like go to a hypnotist like I did and like find out that like I went to the you know, what's it called, the intergalactic council, and like volunteered to come to Earth and like be an ascension volunteer like Dolores Cannon says, then like get into it, you know, like whatever, like it's all good and all of it's real because all of it's not real.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You have such a gifted way of sharing that. Thank you. I love it. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So, I want to talk a little bit before we go about you and how people can get more of this. So, I want to, can you take a moment and share with me a little bit more about how you work with your clients and maybe how people can engage with you? Do you have a favorite platform or something? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, I do have one-on-one clients right now, and it's like a way more 3D looking thing that I claim to be doing with them, but it's a cover for me being able to talk about this kind of stuff. And honestly, it's like I had such an experience of suffering for the bulk of my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't like for a time period, I was really into it. Like
Yeah.
it really was like I liked it. It's kind of like when you have phases where you're like, my favorite song ever is like Lauryn Hill, like Zion. Like I need to listen to it on repeat for 12 years. And then you're like, I don't want to hear it again, right? So I feel like that's where I was at with like being this struggling victim and like super suffering. I really liked it for a long time. And now I'm a little over it. Like, I want to try like feeling some pleasure and some joy and some
Mm-hmm.
ease. And the best way that I've been able to tap into that is through understanding my nervous system and like
Mm.
doing these nervous system regulation exercises, which are just basically like everything you've ever been taught by indigenous wisdom, like breathing and chanting and
Yeah.
moving your body and meditating. So I share that information with anybody who is also wanting to kind of shift out of that, like everything's terrible and my life is horrible, and wants
Yeah.
to like consider trying out if they can feel like they're not pulled down by the waves of their emotions and the circumstances of their life, and want to figure out how to sort of like have the tools to sail through like stormy, wavy
Yeah.
circumstances and feelings and still feel like capable of making decisions and having options. We understand
Yeah.
that the lower brain, where we experience like something's wrong, I'm in trouble, it doesn't have tools or resources to be able to make decisions or problem solve. The frontal lobe does, and we're cut
Mm-hmm.
off from that frontal lobe when we're in that defense state. So I just am sharing information about how to shift back up to that frontal lobe if
Yeah.
you want to. Um, and go ahead.
Now I understand you're an SSP provider. Is that what you're speaking of, or can
Yeah.
you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the SSP is called the Safe and Sound Protocol. It's
Okay.
a listening program of music that's been specifically filtered by like sound scientists
Oh,
um,
wow.
to interact with your vagus nerve, which is the nerve that governs your like fight, flight, freeze response. And it increases that nerve's flexibility in being willing and able to take in the whole spectrum, like have a wider perspective on
Yeah.
experience. So when our nervous system is sort of like inundated with threat, we can become hyper focused on those threat cues. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why you see a lot of auditory sensitivity and a lot of
Mm.
decreased social engagement, especially in neurodiverse people,
Mm-hmm.
because their actual like inner ear muscle has like tensed up and tightened so that it's hyper focused on those threats that would have matched
Hmm.
where our lower brain is attuned to. So, like, not language, because we didn't have language when we were reptiles, but like the thundering of hooves or the
Mm.
frequency or vibration of lightning or of a tsunami or of a big animal running towards us or growling at us. And so we
Mm-hmm.
tune out speech, and the
Mm.
frontal lobe, or the part that's connected to the what's called the ventral vagus has just been online for about 200 million years. And those other parts, the fight, flight, and the freeze, have been online for about 500 million years. And so
Mm-hmm.
this new part is where we engage or co-regulate with other beings. And so when we're having a hard time co-regulating with other beings, because we're still in that lower brain, we
Yeah.
can't access like choices. So the SSP, I support people in listening to this program and then developing their understanding of how their body has sort of gotten into a rut or a
Yeah.
mismatch, and how to support their vagus nerve so that they can get back into the ventral vagal and into the frontal lobe and like make decisions about how they want to respond to their life rather than just reacting to it.
That is incredible. Yeah, yeah, it's so many things. I feel like we could have another podcast on that one.
Sure,
It's like
sure.
I'm
Let's do
sitting
it.
here as a mother. I'm like, okay,
I
I'm
know. I
thinking
want
of
to,
this, I'm
yeah.
thinking of that, I'm thinking
When
that,
we
yeah.
get offline, we should definitely do that because I'm thinking that too.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the other thing, and you can find out about that on my website, which is www.anexperiencer.com, like
yeah.
AN. But the other thing that I'm like having fun with is my YouTube channel, which I think,
Oh,
yeah, is really fun. And I talk about like everything that comes to my mind along with all the nervous system stuff.
love it.
And that is Be the Change 8-8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll be sure to include all that fun information in the show notes that, yeah, because we definitely want to learn more. It's so beautiful just hearing you share, and you have a gift of how you present, like we talked about, challenging information in a way that feels very supportive, no matter where the person is on their journey. So I'm so grateful for, you being here and having this conversation with me today. So, the last thing I like to ask is, do you have, in closing, anything to the person that is listening? Is there anything you feel inclined to share as a guidance as we go, whether it be about, you know, embodying your authentic expression, of feeling connected to those senses we talked about, allowing the journey to be, wherever you identify, as victim or villain or, whatever experience, any last guidance you would share to close things out?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I have spent a lot of time thinking about my death in this lifetime and what would be like the one thing that I would want to offer from this lifetime. And
Mm-hmm.
it's that I truly think there's no way that we can ever be guilty or wrong, that we are
Mm-hmm.
absolutely innocent, that no
Mm-hmm.
matter, exactly like you just said, no matter what role we're playing, what character we're playing, what we've done, I just think we're absolutely innocent in that whatever we were doing was based off of what we were thinking and believing in that moment. And when you're thinking and believing whatever it is that you're thinking and believing, you can't think or believe anything else. It's just, you can't. And so, whatever you did was it was just because of that. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody around you is the same deal. So, we're just all innocent. And I love everybody wherever they are, truly. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
Ah, so wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.